This is probably the stone that is most famous for not being pissed on. Let's get something out of the way right off the bat. Mozart never urinated on this rock. They might call it the Pinkelstein, but don't believe the hype. Don't believe the urine festival or the urine plaque or the urine stories that the locals might tell you. They're all just taking the piss. This is the town of Rashala. And while it is beautiful, it's not particularly special, a blip on the outskirts of a slightly larger blip. It isn't famous, nor does it get much in the way of tourism. It's just one town among the many. But the tourism that it does have exists almost entirely because of the one thing that makes this town proud. They produce wine. And they're just close enough to Vienna to make it worth a weekend visit. They've been producing that wine for so long that nobody can even really remember when they started it. The historical sites of this region all mention it. The statues all assert it. This is a vineland. And when you come here, that's the thing you're supposed to enjoy. In Vienna, however, the closest area where people might actually come from, they don't produce wine. What they produce is Mozart. Although, in fairness, they haven't produced him for quite some time. Yet, for reasons I don't personally understand, he remains a very important part of their cultural identity. Which isn't to say he wasn't enormously famous in his time. He was probably the first true international celebrity in the sense that we use that term today, and yet that only makes me more confused, because I can't imagine Toronto treating Drake as their most important figure well into the 2300s. Suffice it to say, I'm not Viennese. However, back here in Rashala, they didn't even have a Mozart. What they had was wine. And so to convince people to come and drink that wine, they'd invent themselves a Mozart. While reading a fictional novel about Mozart's travels to Prague, somebody in this town decided that it meant he would have driven down the very road that goes through their tiny blip. And although that wasn't even true within the fiction that they were quoting, it did raise a very interesting question. What if it was, though? Well, if it was true, then he might have had something to drink from this very region. For example, some wine. And if he'd done that, he might very well have had to pee. A pretty big deal if you ask me. And hey, what's this? A cool-looking rock? Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Roshalans of all ages, let me propose an idea for you. Mozart, do you remember that guy? He pissed on this rock. Nobody can say he didn't, just as long as we all say he did. And so that's exactly what this little town decided to do. In 1975, they'd frame the stone as special, build it a little urine plaque, and then declare a yearly urine festival around its wettened existence. They'd even move the stone to the street where they all sold their wine, so if any tourists wanted to come and see it, well, they'd have to walk past a dozen or more cute little cellars where they could pick up some of this region's most enjoyable product. And after finding themselves alone with the stone, if those tourists were a bit discerning, if those tourists had arrived with a dream in their hearts, they might even realize that by drinking that wine, they could one-up Vienna's most famous man. Which is exactly what I did. So take that, Mozart. You might not have pinkled on this Stein, but I sure did. And what's more, I had a pretty good time doing it. So Rashala, I salute you. You are a funny little town. This is Rare Earth.